The black sedan slowed down just enough for the window to roll down. A second later, a gunshot shattered the silence of the Utah laboratory, missing the inventor's chest by inches. T.H. Moray was warned to stop, but he didn't listen. He had a device that generated 50,000 watts of cold electricity from thin air, and the energy cartel was ready to erase him to keep the meter running. They thought they destroyed all the evidence in 1947. They were wrong. A lost notebook has just been found, and it changes the entire history of physics. The equation that scared them. It starts with a box that wasn't supposed to exist. Deep in a forgotten archive, tucked away in a vault that hadn't seen daylight in 50 years, a researcher brushed the dust off a leather-bound journal. The date on the first page read November 1st, 1913. This wasn't just a diary, it was a crime scene of scientific suppression. The handwriting belonged to Thomas Henry Moray, a man who by all accounts solved the world's energy crisis before World War II even started. And get this, the notes inside don't just describe a theory. They contain the specific handwritten schematics for a device that the US government and corporate giants spent 40 years trying to erase. We're talking about a machine that sat on a table, weighed about 40 pounds, and pumped out 50 kilowatts of electricity. To put that in perspective, that is enough juice to power a modern neighborhood, run heavy machinery, and light up a skyscraper, all without a single drop of oil, coal, or battery acid. It pulled power from the air itself. For decades, we were told Moray was a fraud, or that his tech was lost in a fire. But here's the catch. The notebook reveals that the fire was no accident and the technology wasn't lost. It was taken. The surfacing of these documents in 2025 has sent shockwaves through the alternative energy community. We aren't looking at vague scribbles. These are detailed radiation measurements from 1939 showing energy spikes of 1.5 million electron volts from ambient air. That is a number that shouldn't be possible according to the physics textbooks you read in high school. But Moray wasn't reading textbooks, he was rewriting them. The timing of this discovery is suspicious too. It comes right as global energy prices are hitting all-time highs and the grid is failing. Basically, someone wanted this kept quiet, and for a very long time, they succeeded. The notebook details the exact composition of what Moray called the Swedish stone. This was a soft, white, synthetic stone that acted as a valve for cosmic energy. For 90 years, skeptics said Moray was faking it with hidden batteries. But the sheer output makes that impossible. A battery capable of running a 50 kilowatt load in the 1930s would have weighed tons and filled an entire basement. Moray's device was small enough to carry with one hand. The text in the journal is frantic, written by a man who knew he was being watched. He describes tuning in to the universe's heartbeat. He writes about the sea of energy in which the Earth floats. It sounds poetic, but the math he used to back it up is terrifyingly precise. He wasn't creating energy, he was just building a bucket to catch the rain that is constantly falling on us in the form of cosmic rays. And that's putting it lightly. The potential here is infinite power anywhere on Earth for free. But whenever free and energy end up in the same sentence, bad things happen to the inventor. The notebook ends abruptly, right around the time the threats turned into physical attacks. This isn't just a story about a cool gadget. This is about the systematic hunting down of a technology that could have liberated humanity. The surfacing of this notebook is the smoking gun we have been waiting for. It proves that the classification Moray complained about on his deathbed wasn't paranoia, it was policy. And the scary part, the notebook mentions that he wasn't the only one. He references other engineers, other strange accidents, and a pattern of suppression that goes all the way to the top. As we dig into these pages, we have to ask ourselves a controversial question. If this tech existed in 1939, why are we still burning rocks to keep the lights on? The answer might be darker than you think, but the real danger began when he turned the machine on. The 200,000 volt shock. Imagine walking into a laboratory in Salt Lake City in the mid-1930s. The room is dark, filled with heavy wooden tables and the smell of ozone. Standing there is Thomas Henry Moray, a humble, intense man fiddling with a series of strange glowing tubes. He asks you to check the table for hidden wires. You check. There is nothing. No batteries, no wall outlets, no hidden generators under the floorboards. The device sits isolated on rubber mats. He flips the switch and suddenly a bank of 100 light bulbs blazes to life. The light is blindingly white, brighter than anything you have seen before. But here's the crazy part. The bulbs are cold. You can touch them. The electricity flowing through them isn't the hot, angry current we use today. It's something else. Moray called it cold electricity. In one demonstration, he powered a heated iron and a heavy-duty motor simultaneously. The motor hummed, the iron got hot, but the wires connecting them remained ice cold. This defied every law of thermodynamics known to man. Ohm's law says those wires should have melted. Moray's device didn't care about Ohm's law. Witnesses included engineers from General Electric and bright minds from universities. They arrived as skeptics, convinced they would find a hidden battery. They left terrified and amazed. In one famous test, Moray disconnected the antenna that gathered the signal and the lights died instantly. He reconnected it and they flared back up. This proved the power was coming from an external source, the waves of the universe. He was tuning into the energy signature of the cosmos like you tune into a radio station. But the most shocking moment came during a test where he allowed a skeptic to short-circuit the device. Usually, a short circuit with 50,000 watts would cause a massive explosion or a fire. Instead, the arc of electricity that jumped was stark white, silent and harmless to the touch, yet it possessed immense power. He measured the voltage at over 200,000 volts. Yet due to the high frequency, it moved over the skin rather than through the organs. It was a completely different beast than the AC power that Edison and Tesla fought over. The newly surfaced notebook gives us the technical breakdown of what was happening inside that box. It describes a multi-stage valve system. The energy from the universe is high frequency and chaotic. The Swedish stone, that mysterious semiconductor Moray found, acted as a gatekeeper. It slowed down the cosmic waves, stepping them down into a usable form. It was a transformer, but instead of stepping down voltage, it stepped down the frequency of the universe itself. So, here's the deal. If this worked, it meant the end of the utility grid. You wouldn't need transmission lines, you wouldn't need power plants, you could have a box on your roof, the size of a microwave, powering your entire existence. And that is exactly why the hammer dropped. During a demonstration for the Rural Electrification Administration, a man identified later as a covert agent accidentally smashed the prime generating tube. It wasn't a clumsy mistake. The notebook describes the man's cold, calculated movement. He knew exactly which tube was the heart of the system. In seconds, the device was dead. Moray tried to rebuild it, but the specific Swedish stone composition was exhausted and his suppliers in Europe had strangely vanished or stopped responding. The sabotage was precise. They didn't just want to break the machine, they wanted to break the man. The device wasn't just a threat to the electric bill, it was a threat to the physics establishment. If Moray was right, then the vacuum of space isn't empty. It is full. And that means every gallon of oil ever sold was unnecessary. The sheer amount of wealth that would evaporate if this device went public is in the trillions. That's why the accident in the lab was just the beginning. The attacks were about to leave the lab and follow him home. The stolen blueprint. It's not that simple though. You might think if he had the tech, why not just go to the press? Well, he tried, and the response was a bullet. In 1931, things went from academic rivalry to grand theft, auto-style violence. Moray was driving his car in Salt Lake City with his family when a black sedan pulled up alongside them. No words were exchanged. The windows rolled down and the barrel of a gun emerged. Shots rang out. A bullet tore through the upholstery, narrowly missing his son and grazing Moray. This wasn't a warning shot, it was an assassination attempt. Moray slammed on the gas, swerving through traffic to escape. When he later reported it, the police shrugged. The investigation went nowhere. The notebook reveals Moray's own suspicion. He believed the hit was ordered by what he called oil men from Texas. They knew that if the radiant energy device hit the market, the oil derricks would rust in the fields. But the physical intimidation didn't stop at drive-bys. The harassment campaign was relentless. Moray's laboratory was broken into multiple times. But get this, the thieves didn't take money or expensive tools. They took only his notes and the specific components of the valve. It was a targeted extraction of knowledge. They wanted to know how he did it, and then they wanted to ensure he couldn't do it again. Then came the Russian connection. In the notebook, Moray writes about a man named Felix, a supposed friend and engineer who gained his trust. Felix spent weeks in the lab learning the ins and outs of the device. One morning, Moray arrived to find the lab trashed. Key components were smashed with a hammer, specifically the ones that were hardest to manufacture. Felix was gone. Years later, rumors swirled that Felix was a double agent working for either the Soviets or a domestic corporate interest sent in to neutralize the threat. The FBI eventually got involved, but not to help. In 1939, right as the war clouds were gathering, agents raided Moray's home. They claimed his device was creating radio interference that could jeopardize national security. It was a flimsy excuse. They confiscated tubes, drawings, and logs. Moray was told it was for safekeeping. He never saw those items again. The newly surfaced notebook seems to be a duplicate or a hidden set of logs that he managed to stash away before the feds kicked down his door. The level of coordination required to ruin this man is staggering. We are talking about phone taps, mail interception, and constant surveillance. His son, John Moray, grew up watching his father look out the blinds, terrified of every car that parked on the street. The psychological warfare was designed to make him look crazy. If you tell people the government is stealing your cosmic energy machine, you sound insane. That was their best weapon. But the suppression wasn't just about Moray. The notebook references a list, a compilation of other inventors who had met similar fates. It seems Moray was plugged into an underground network of geniuses who were being picked off one by one. This brings us to the most chilling realization. Moray wasn't an isolated incident. He was case number 95 in a much larger file. This is where the Orion Project files change everything. The Energy Cartel. What most people don't realize is that Thomas Moray is just the tip of the iceberg. If you think his story is an isolated incident or just one man with bad luck, you need to zoom out. There is a document that ties all of this together. It's known as the Energy Invention Suppression Cases file. It was compiled by a relentless researcher named Gary Vesperman for something called the Orion Project. Now, before you roll your eyes, understand this. This isn't some random conspiracy blog post written by a guy in his basement. This is a forensic ledger. It is a detailed, citation-heavy collection of 95 separate cases. 95. That is almost 100 different inventors, engineers, and scientists who all claim to have cracked the code for free energy only to be harassed, threatened, or completely silenced. When you read through the file, it doesn't read like science fiction. It reads like a casualty list of a hidden war. It documents over 20 suspicious deaths. It lists 32 documented threats against families, and perhaps most damning of all, it lists 59 separate interventions by the U.S. Patent Office to classify technology under national security orders. Thomas Moray is listed in this file as Case 95. But when you start looking at the other names on the list, you see the exact same pattern. It's like looking at a playbook that has been used for decades. Take the famous case of Stanley Meyer. This is one of the most controversial stories in modern history. Meyer didn't just have a theory, he had a working prototype. He invented a water fuel cell. He retrofitted a dune buggy to run on it. He claimed this buggy could drive 100 miles on a single gallon of water. Not gasoline, not diesel, just plain water. According to the reports, he wasn't just splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen in a traditional way, which takes a lot of energy. He found a way to fracture the water molecule using a specific frequency requiring very little power to release massive amounts of energy. He was driving this thing around. He was showing it off. Then came the offers. Meyer claimed he was offered $1 billion, a billion with a B, to sell the rights to the technology. The condition? He had to hand it over and never speak of it again. The buyers wanted to bury the tech in a vault. Meyer refused. He wanted this to be for the people. A week later, Meyer was at a Cracker Barrel restaurant with his brother and two potential foreign investors. Everything seemed fine. He took a sip of cranberry juice. Suddenly, he stood up. He grabbed his throat. He started choking violently. He ran outside to the parking lot, fell to his knees, and yelled his final words. "They poisoned me." He collapsed and passed away right there on the asphalt. The official report? A cerebral aneurysm, a sudden brain issue. But the Vesperman files suggest otherwise. His brother has always maintained that Stanley was silenced to stop the water car from hitting the market. Then there is Eugene Malov. He wasn't a garage tinkerer, he was a highly respected scientist. He was the chief science writer at the MIT news office. Malov became convinced that cold fusion, the ability to create nuclear energy at room temperature, was real. He discovered that researchers at MIT had actually fudged their data to make cold fusion look like a failure just to protect their own funding for traditional hot fusion projects. Malov was about to blow the whistle. He had the documents. He was going to expose a massive fraud that had held back clean energy for decades. Before he could go public with the full extent of the cover-up, he was found lifeless in his driveway. The police called it a robbery gone wrong. They said it was random violence. But here is the strange part. Nothing of value was taken. His wallet was there, his car was there. The only thing that had been touched? His files, his office had been ransacked. The Vesperman report marks this as a clear targeted removal. The suppression tactics in the Vesperman report are actually categorized. It's a step-by-step system. First, they try to buy you out. Vesperman calls this financial strangulation. They offer you enough money to live like a king for 10 lifetimes, but the catch is always the same. The technology goes into a dark vault, never to be seen again. They buy the patent to kill the patent. If you have morals and refuse the money, they move to phase 2, patent burial. Did you know there are currently over 5,000 patents that are classified by the US government? You might think these are all nuclear weapons or advanced spy gear, but they aren't. Many of them are energy generation and propulsion systems. They are hidden under a law called the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. This act allows the government to look at your patent application and say, this is too dangerous for the public. They issue a secrecy order. If you talk about your own invention or try to build it, you can go to prison. It is a legal gag order that freezes innovation in its tracks. If legal hurdles don't stop you, they move to intimidation. The men in black aren't just a movie trope. In the Vesperman files, there is the case of Frank Richardson. He built a magnetic generator that could power itself. He reported that shortly after he got it working, black unmarked helicopters began hovering over his lab for days. They would just sit there watching. It was psychological warfare. Then, 2 of his technicians passed away in suspicious accidents shortly after. Richardson got the message. He stopped his work. The Orion Project argues that a global energy cartel manages this suppression. It isn't just one government. It's a mix of oil giants, banking families, and rogue intelligence agencies. Their goal is simple: maintain scarcity. If energy is free, the cost of everything drops to near zero. Think about it. Transportation becomes free. Manufacturing becomes cheap. Food production costs drop. The value of the dollar, which is tied to oil, the petrodollar, would collapse. The entire global economic system relies on us paying for fuel. They aren't protecting national security, they are protecting their bank accounts. Thomas Moray's notebook validates this entire list. In his own handwriting, he mentions the hidden hand that blocks the supply of materials. He writes about the invisible wall that rose up every time he got close to a production model. He felt the pressure of this cartel back in the 1930s. The surfacing of his notes in 2025 confirms that the suppression mechanism Vesperman described has been active for at least a century. The scale of this is mind-boggling. We aren't talking about a few bad apples or some jealous competitors. We are talking about a systemic, organized effort to keep humanity in the dark ages of combustion. We are still burning dead dinosaurs to get around, while the universe offers us infinite lightning. And history shows that anyone who tries to flip the switch gets erased. But here's the thing about physics. It didn't disappear just because the inventor died. The equations are still there, waiting for someone brave enough to pick them up. The final warning. So here's the deal with the science. Why was Moray's device considered the most dangerous invention of the 20th century? It wasn't a bomb, it wasn't a weapon, it was a battery that never died. And the secret behind it all comes down to three words: zero-point energy. In quantum physics, we know that a vacuum, empty space, isn't actually empty. It is seething with energy. It is alive. Particles pop in and out of existence constantly, billions of times a second. Think of the ocean. The surface looks calm, but underneath there are massive currents and crushing pressure. Space is the same way. The amount of raw potential energy in a single coffee cup of empty space is enough to boil all the oceans on Earth. That sounds like a massive exaggeration, but it isn't. That is the literal math of quantum mechanics. It's called the Casimir effect, and mainstream science admits it exists. They just tell us it's impossible to touch. Henry Moray didn't listen. He found a way to sync his device with this cosmic jitter. His valve created a gateway, a pressure difference that allowed this ambient energy to flow into his circuit like water rushing into a sinkhole. He wasn't breaking the laws of physics. He was exploiting a loophole that mainstream science refused to acknowledge. He called it radiant energy, but today, in 2025, we call it vacuum fluctuation harvesting. But here's where the theories get wild. Witnesses who saw the device running in the 1930s reported something that defies all logical explanation. When Moray turned on the radiant energy device, the wires didn't get hot. In normal electricity, resistance creates heat. That's why your phone gets warm. But Moray's wires got cold. The light bulbs powered by his device shone with a brilliant white light, but the glass remained cool to the touch. This is known as cold electricity or negative entropy. One leading theory suggests that Moray wasn't just pulling electricity from the air. He was pulling energy from a parallel dimension. The cold electricity phenomenon suggests he was reversing the flow of time at a subatomic level. Instead of energy exploding outwards and creating heat, the energy was imploding inwards, pulling heat out of the environment to fuel the reaction. This is tech that shouldn't exist on Earth. So, how did a humble electrical engineer from Salt Lake City figure this out? This brings us to the Swedish stone. The heart of the device was a small white stone used as a semiconductor. Moray called it his valve. For decades, people thought it was just a strange mix of lead or silica. But the 2025 analysis of his recovered notebook by the Scalar Light Foundation has dropped a bombshell. The chemical composition in the notes doesn't match standard geology. The notebook reveals a recipe, a precise blend of germanium, bismuth, and a specific radioactive isotope found only in a rare Swedish ore. But the ratios are impossible to achieve with 1930s technology. This has led to the meteorite theory. New researchers believe the Swedish stone wasn't from a mine, it was from a meteorite impact site. The theory claims that Moray found a piece of debris from a collapsed star or a planetary core that had been bombarded with cosmic rays for millions of years. This stone naturally vibrated at what is called the forbidden frequency. The forbidden frequency is a specific vibration rate measured in terahertz that causes the fabric of space to yield energy. It's like an opera singer shattering a glass, but instead of shattering glass, this frequency shatters the barrier between our dimension and the energy sea of the vacuum. Moray's valve didn't generate power. It was a tuning fork. And once it started vibrating, the universe itself poured energy into it to stop the vibration. There is even a theory connecting Moray to Nikola Tesla. We know Moray was a massive fan of Tesla. Rumors have circulated for years that Moray met with an aging Tesla in New York just before Tesla died. The theory goes that Tesla realized he was being watched and his papers would be seized. So he gave the final piece of the puzzle, the secret of the cosmic ray detector, to the younger Moray. Moray's device wasn't just his invention, it was the final working version of Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, shrunk down to the size of a shoebox. And that is why the suppression was so aggressive. The notebook ends with a final chilling warning from Moray. He writes, "The truth floats eternal." They can classify the paper, but they cannot classify the stars. He knew that eventually someone else would stumble upon the same physics. He was right. but he was also terrified. The 2025 documents reveal that Moray believed the energy had a biological impact. He wrote about feeling a strange calmness when the machine was running. His chronic aches disappeared. This leads to the bioregeneration theory. If this energy creates cold electricity that reverses entropy, could it also reverse aging? Could it cure disease? If Moray's device was a free energy machine and a medical miracle, the threat to the establishment becomes astronomical. You aren't just disrupting the oil and gas industry, you are disrupting big pharma and the entire medical system. We are talking about a quadrillion-dollar loss for the world's elite. Imagine a world where you never plug your car in. You never pay a heating bill, you never pay for electricity. Desalination of water becomes cheap, solving the global water crisis instantly. Pollution ends overnight because we stop burning things. It sounds like utopia to us. But to the people running the show, it looks like a financial apocalypse. They would lose their leverage over the population. This is why the release of these notes in 2025 is such a massive deal. The genie is out of the bottle. You can burn a lab, you can silence an inventor, and you can ridicule a scientist. Current researchers are already reporting strange anomalies when attempting to replicate the valve using the 2025 data. They are seeing the cold electricity return. Labs in Eastern Europe are reporting small spikes in voltage that defy Ohm's law. Wires are freezing over when high current passes through them. We are standing on the absolute edge of a precipice, staring down into an abyss that mainstream science has tried to ignore for nearly a century. This isn't just about a rediscovered patent or a dusty blueprint found in an archive. It is about a fundamental force of nature that was aggressively suppressed for 90 long years. The technology is no longer dormant. It is clawing its way back into the light, breaking through the cracks of a cover-up designed to keep humanity in the dark. But as these ancient secrets resurface, we are realizing that the danger is higher than it has ever been. So do you think Moray really tapped into the cosmos? Or was he the greatest magician of the 20th century? And if he was a fake, why did the FBI need his notes? Hit that like button if you want the truth declassified, and subscribe for more mysteries the history books left out.